Hi everyone, my name is Kittipon Bunma. I'm from the Geoinformatics Center at the Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand. So we're together with our colleagues from the FAO and also the International Institute of System Analysis, IIASA from Austria. We developed this PyAEZ, which is the Python package for Agro-ecological Zoning. And today is a kickoff event for our training session for this year, where we are launching the PyAEZ version 2.2. Okay. Am I more audible now? I'll keep my microphone close. Before we start, I'll just quickly share the agenda. So this training will run from the 11th to the 14th of December. And for today, it's going to be probably the shortest session out of all the 4 days. So we will have some welcoming remarks from Professor Rajendra from AIT, and then that will be followed by Matthew then Matthew from FAO NSL section will talk about the role of PyAEZ and GAEZ, and then we have our expert Gunther Fischer from IIASA from Austria to give us an in-depth introduction of the AEC framework. And then we're followed by coffee break, and then myself will introduce you a bit to the format of the training, as well as a quick introduction to the PyAEZ modules. Then we have our colleague also from the FAO, Ricardo, who developed part of the team who developed this tool called Cover Analytics, which made climate data more easily accessible. We're looking to link that with PyAEZ in the future. So he'll be giving us insight into how to use his tool. And then Bo Daman from FAO Asia and the Pacific, the regional office, will give us some insight into the potential application of PyAEZ. And so, let me stop the screen and please welcome Professor Rajendra from AIT for a brief introduction and welcoming remark.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kittipon. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I think thank you for this opportunity to welcome everyone, all the participants to these 4 days long training sessions and the colleagues representing different organizations as the instructor and experts. So once again, good afternoon from Bangkok, Thailand. I am based in Thailand at AIT with few colleagues like Kittipon and other colleagues from GIC. It is with great pleasure and excitement that I welcome you all to this distinguished event, a 4-day training on PyAEZ version 2.2, and advanced training to prepare agro-ecological zoning and crop suitability using Python. As you know, today we are confronted with several global issues, including climate change, land degradation, biodiversity loss, food, energy, water insecurity, disasters, and so forth. Majority of these global change issues, if not all, are due to the human causes, the anthropogenic causes. And one major cause is inappropriate or inefficient use of our resource system, such as land resources, which has been severely degraded due to inappropriate land use practices. So today's global mainstream programs and action, whether it is about climate change mitigation and adaptation, or biodiversity conservation, or land and ecosystem restoration, all of them, it requires carefully designed terrestrial or land planning with regards to what land use practices and activities should be carried out in our lands to sustainably achieve multiplicity of the goals related to climate, food, water, while restoring our land and ecosystems. We need to remember that our specific land use practice in any given specific area should aim to achieve several of these objectives in a balanced way, which requires many things to consider. So the first step towards this is proper land resource planning, followed by several other requirements of inputs, policy, finance, market, community mobilization or participation, etc., to realize the development of sustainable land use practices. Agro-ecological zoning methodology developed by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the International Institute for Applied System Analysis, in short IIASA, is a well-established system for land evaluation and planning to support sustainable land uses. Although AEZ framework was initially established in 1978 in response to an assessment of the abilities of the world natural resources to provide the needs of its growing population. But by today, it has immensely evolved to accommodate the current issues such as impact of climate change, and the system is able to contribute directly to several United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, like 1, no poverty, 2, zero hunger, 12, responsible consumption and production, or SDG 15, life on land, and so on. So for the benefit of global community to support the national, subnational level planning through AEZ, the Global Agro-ecological Zoning, in short guides, assessment was developed by the FAO and collaborating organization in 2000. And since then, it has continuously been improved by releasing new versions, one after another. The fourth version of guide was launched in June 2021, and the increased demand has led to development of version 5. As it gets evolving, the system is also becoming more complex as the decision-making tool. It requires the consideration of several factors that influence our decision. So PyAEZ is a Python package equipped with computational routines related to the agro-ecological zoning framework and implementation of AEZ methodology. A user-friendly and intuitive, the PyAEZ package consists of the comprehensive AEZ routines with regard to data and needed analysis through its 6 different modules. The Geospatial Unit, Land and Water Division of the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, the IIASA and the AIT, Asian Institute of Technology, have been working together in developing this package. Some of you may know that AIZ is a postgraduate university offering about 40 different master's and PhD level programs, such as in climate change, agriculture, natural resource management, food, remote sensing, GIS, artificial intelligence, data science, business, and so on. The Geoinformatics Center, which is taking lead in this venture of the training with the partner organization, the center is representing AIT in this collaboration, and it is a center of excellence specializing in remote sensing, GIS, software programming, and other related area of geoinformatics. This collaboration has successfully developed version 2.2 of PyAEZ, and hence this training is being organized for the benefit of enthusiastic users and professionals like you. Over the next 4 days, you will have the unique opportunity to delve deep into the intricacies of this innovative package through expert-led sessions, the interactive workshop, and the hands-on exercise. The training aims to equip you with the knowledge and proficiency to leverage the capabilities of this AEZ program effectively. And by the end of the training, you will have a better understanding of the AEZ assessment process and the program, the software itself. You will be able to run the PyAEZ programs for different crops under different scenarios, which is very important yet interesting. And you will be able to produce some of the visualization of the PyAEZ results. The package PyAEZ can be useful for varieties of modeling purposes. And I'm sure each of you find some usefulness of this package in whatever work you do in your professional workspace. We are gathered here from different parts of the world. I was asking Dr. Kitifon earlier, maybe some 140 registrants representing 30 plus countries. So we are not just as participants, but as pioneers in a collaborative effort of taking AEZ to a different height as a decision support tool. Hence, I encourage you to actively engage, ask the questions during these 4 days of training sessions, and collaborate with your peers. This training is not just about mastering a tool, it's about fostering a vibrant AEZ community, which I believe, AEZ community of learners and the innovators. As we said, we are version 2.2 now, we further might be developing further. So your insights and contribution are integral to the success of this collective endeavor. This initiative has been a collective endeavor itself, brought to fruition through the hard work and dedication of 4 organizations, as I mentioned earlier, who are committed to advancing knowledge and innovation in the area of land management and agro-ecological zoning. I also like to put on record my sincere appreciation to our all collaborators and colleagues for these fruitful collaborations. On behalf of the organizers, I welcome all the participants and the instructor experts to this training on PyAEZ version 2.2, and also extend my heartfelt gratitude for your participation. Let us embrace the next 4 days with enthusiasm, curiosity, and a shared commitment to learning and collaboration, so that we can make informed decisions in our planning using the tool like PyAEZ. I also like to thank all the colleagues involved in organizing this training. I wish all for a fruitful experience in these 4 days of the training. Welcome once again, and thank you very much for this opportunity to welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rajendra. Next up, we have Mr. Matthew from, so he's the head of the Geospatial unit of the Land and Water Division from the FAO to talk about the role of PyAEZ and GAEZ.
Thank you, colleagues. I cannot share my screen. If you can allow me sharing my screen, please.
Okay,
perfect. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Mathieu Henry. I'm the acting head of the Geospatial unit at the Land and Water Division in FAO in Rome. And as Professor Rajendra mentioned, I think the first lesson that we learned from this training is about partnership and collaboration. Also because the agro-ecological zoning or the agro-ecological zoning or the Python agro-ecological zoning is based on a multitude of data and information that comes from different partners and organizations. And if we want to have good results, we need to have good data. And to have good data, we need to have access to them. So it's important that first we think about where the data come from and to make sure that the data can be made available to the ones who are preparing this calculation, taking into consideration that the impact is not sector specific, but this is multi-sectoral, and that contributes to overall sustainable development goals and not only to a specific institutional related activities. I will give a quick presentation about the ideas, the visions about how PyAEZ is contributing to GAEZ. I need to share my screen. Okay, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So first, a quick update on where we are in terms of progress. I mean, when we talk about global agro-ecological zoning, this is about 30 years of collaboration between IIASA in Vienna, FAO in Rome, and this collaboration has further enhanced during the last year, in particular with the collaboration with AIT Bangkok, but also other organizations such as Mississippi State University recently, to see how we can maximize the possibility to adapt this methodological approach to different contexts. So in 2021, the Geospatial platform was launched. So that's an important milestone because the data were not yet available, and because of the large amount of data that was complicated to make them available. Now we try to significantly increase the number of data and application, also through the development of PyAEZ. So this, since January 2022, started a number of consultation, and several of you were part of this consultation on how we can improve this methodological approach. But we are also learning this process. We are all learning from this process, and to understand what can be all the different kind of needs use of this data that will also include requirements in terms of spatial and temporal resolution, but also data access to maximize the possibility that the results match with what you are expecting. In November 2022, the PyAEZ version 2 was launched, and some trainings were organized. And the idea of PyAEZ, it is to maximize the possibility that in addition to the global data, that you can have national specific or regional specific agro-ecological zoning application that better match to your needs, taking into consideration that the data at national or at regional level may not be fully harmonized with the global ones, or the access may not be provided when we do global calculations. And within your institution or within your organization, you may want to use open Python script to run this kind of calculation. In 2023, a joint event that was recently organized with Mississippi State University and, of course, with IIASA and with our colleagues from S3 on the use of big data and high computer power to increase the speed of the calculation, but also increase the spatial and the temporal resolution of the data. This is quite demanding in terms of time, but also in terms of computing capacity. So it's quite important that we well understand what the data are to be used for, and to maximize the possibility to have data that match our needs. In June 2024, so in next year, there should be updated GAEZ scripts finalized and integrated into the GAEZ data portal. And now we are in the phase of final testing that will and piloting of the script during the next months, that will be fully provided on the platform mid of next year. Now, the GAEZ data portal, most of you know what it is about. It's quite significant amount of data and information about natural resources. Also, is what when we talk about partnership, this is important to know. I mean, and to see that most of the time the institutions who are providing, who are producing data on land cover, on terrain, on soil, and others are different. And there is a need of a process of harmonization. So this harmonization, whether this is done at the national, at the regional, or at the global level, is important to be able to run a calculation that makes sense. So then you have about 180 variables, and these 180 variables can be taken into consideration whether at the global level, but also at the national level, when you are developing soil data, when you are developing uncovered data sets, to take into consideration these variables, because 180 variables, most of the time, they represent most of the needs for the different institutions who are in need of information related to land resources, but also agricultural production in the context of a changed climate. So they are organized along 6 main themes. and 25 sub-team. It is quite well documented. You have documentation for the model, for how to use the platform, how to use PyAEZ with definitions and other information like videos and others. And it is compliant with FAO definition classification standards. That may not be fully or that may be different to what you are using, but it is important for all of us to recognize, I mean, the importance of to match with the global definitions if we want the data to be used by all. In terms of functions, what you have on the platform, you have a data viewer. So the platform was developed with with Esri, and a data viewer was developed to access, visualize, and query the data. There is a part related to data access, how to download the data. You have data about crop, mostly about global crop profiles based on GIS data. Few of them have been prepared. We have continued to work on this. Then you have country data, by countries, country profiles, and access national platforms. If there are other platforms that you think that are relevant to be added here, please share the link with us, and we can promote, we can make the link between this global platform and the national ecological zoning platforms. And you have access to several tools that have been developed that are supporting this process, whether this is for the global data set or the application, national application using PyAEZ. So we talk about EcoCrop, AgroMaps, the Urbanized Control Database, but also PyAEZ. Then you have documentation, the GIS documentation, the user guide, and link to the community where we are providing data, learning resources for the different institutions to be able to share knowledge and experience through this platform. So that means national organization that works in the agricultural sector, or mapping agencies, ministries of environment who work about adaptation to climate change, and others. Well, in short, what we do is we try to strengthen partnerships and network. We work on producing new data and innovation, and we try to facilitate through training like this today, improve knowledge transfer application can be used for your different applications. Now, the integration between GIS Data Portal and PyAEZ. So you have access to PyAEZ on the GIS portal. It is to maximize the possibility for you with your data to be able to run a calculation that may be better or maybe different from the one that you have from the GIS platform. And that better match with your needs. So that was, we did an assessment last year, a bit more than a year ago, about what are the partners who are using, who are interested in partnering around the global ecological zoning platform. There are many more, but just to give you an idea that you have a good distribution between different kind of organizations, whether they are from the academic sector, international organizations, governments, NGOs, the private sector, and the research sector. Now, what we say in French is important to have a good ambitions if we don't want to lose our objectives. So we are thinking about GIS version 5 and GIS version 6 through, as mentioned earlier, to continue to develop this network and this collaboration with various national and regional organizations. Improve network knowledge sharing between international but also regional experts who are using AEZ applications, who are producing data, whether this is about land cover, soil, water, vegetation, biomass, habitat, and data used by regions. Why by region? Because there is a lot of similarities within the regions in terms of crop calendars, ecological zoning definitions for different regions. Some of them are ecological, ones maybe historical or political, and there is a good reason that regional collaboration may be easier to go through for harmonizing, but also sharing that information between countries. So then we aimed at improving the data information repository to provide transparent access to the data that we are using in a scientific way at different levels and through innovative technologies, platforms, and applications. The platforms aims at being as interoperable as possible. Any recommendations, comments on the platform is more than welcome. And in parallel, we try to make it as user-friendly as possible at different geographic levels. So that includes the possibility to use global agro-ecological zoning data to be used at the local level for crop suitability, but also a Python application like PyAEZ. And then in terms of frameworks, because the frameworks are important to put scientific data into action to support adaptation to climate change, but also national agro investment plans, strategies for regional agriculture, sustainable value chains, but also strengthening partnerships and collaboration between the different partners who are involved in the agricultural sector. By this, I would like to say thank you to all the participants. We hope that you will we will learn a lot through this training, and looking forward to receive comments, advice, any questions in the chat or by email, and continuation through this training. Thank you. You're on mute.
Sorry, thank you very much, Matthew. So up next, we have Gunther Fischer from IIASA, Austria, our expert to give an introduction to PyAEZ for land evaluation.
Okay, thank you very much. I will try to share my screen as well. Is this working for me?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Good. My name is Gunther Fischer. Thank you for the introduction. From background, I'm a mathematician, and I'm working as a senior researcher at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, in short, IIASA. This is an international research operation located just outside Vienna in Austria. And last year, we had our 50th anniversary. IIASA's mission is to develop methodological approaches and to do assessments for real-world problems in the fields of demographic change, energy systems transitions, biodiversity and biosphere, including agricultural systems, agriculture and food security, and water sector, to give a few examples. Of course, intertwined with all these problems usually is the question of climate change. So IIASA has devoted a lot of research time to look into climate change mitigation and adaptation issues. In my own work, I have been, it was mentioned, for many years involved in the development of the PyAEZ system, and have been working several decades actually with FAO on this system in a time when data system, geographic data became more and more available, and of course systems approaches had to change more and more away from the original design of the land evaluation methods proposed by FAO in the late 1970s. Oh, how does this work? Can you? Oh. To give you a little bit an insight into the motivation when the system was developed, and over the years, there was the recognition that given the population momentum and population development, and also the increase in incomes in many parts of the world, there will be a need to produce 50 to 60% more food by mid-century 2050. Also, a fact is that agriculture is the largest user of water. The sector is highly dependent on water resources. Estimates are that it accounts for about 70% of total water withdrawals, and perhaps some 40% of the global food crop is derived from irrigated agriculture. As far as climate change is concerned, food and agriculture are both a very exposed and affected sector as also a contributor. The food production and supply chain consumes about 30% of total energy globally. It is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions through deforestation, fertilizer use, wetland rice production, and ruminant livestock. Food and water supply are key human sectors exposed to climate change. So they are impacted, and impacts are already being felt in many countries. And we know from IPCC reports, further global warming, despite some efforts that have taken place and more efforts that are to come, further global warming will be unavoidable. At the same time, agriculture must meet future needs while ensuring profitability to farmers, environmental health, and also social and economic equity. And with the background of all these topics and issues, for achieving these goals and producing enough food, a better planning of land and water resources management is urgently needed to alleviate poverty and food insecurity, and to prevent inappropriate use of natural resources. So the Agro-ecological Zoning framework was developed by FAO and IIASA. It provides a standardized framework and database for land resources appraisal and for analyzing alternatives of land and water resources use. So the idea is to find out what can be growing where, how well, and what are the alternatives, the trade-offs. It contains, since it's dealing with environmental gradients, also with future climate changes, it contains an automatic crop calendar search for assessing historical variability and enabling simulations for adaptation to climate change. It estimates land suitability as one of its key tasks and productivity of a large number of food, feed, and energy crops nowadays across a wide range of environmental settings. It computes crop water requirements and irrigation demand and indicates trade-offs among crops and between rain-fed and irrigated uses, and of course, through these calculations, links to the water sector. Last but not least, it produces comprehensive resource accounts for current land use. It helps reveal apparent yield gaps and resource limitations, and it can identify potential hotspots for land use change and intensification. And in this today and in the coming days, you will hear about many of these issues in more detail. Before I go into the methodology here, some of the applications that have been developed at IIASA with partners throughout the world, where AEZ methodology and data and results have been key inputs to the studies. There was a study done for the Johannesburg Summit, which was on climate change and agricultural vulnerability. This was the first time that global AEZ has been used to assess the impact of climate change on important food crops and to feed this information into an economic food system model to analyze how this would affect the world food production. And it was perhaps the first time that it was very clearly stated that climate change affects all of us, but it is especially a burden to the poor and to people in certain southern countries where climate change is going to impact most and which probably have contributed, or where we know that they have contributed least to the problem of climate change. A second study was done together with the Chinese Academy of Sciences on national food security and agriculture development planning. There, a detailed national Chinese agro-ecological zones model was developed. And again, the biophysical spatial assessment was used to inform a general equilibrium model of the national economy, and various scenarios of future food security were assessed. When biofuels started in the first decade of this century, there was a report commissioned on biofuels and food security. Again, the AEZ input produced information on which kind of biofuel feedstocks could be produced and how that would affect the food system. A nexus study on climate, land, energy, and water strategies and methodology was developed to demonstrate the linkages between these different sectors. When land resources were at a high demand by international partners, we collaborated and contributed AEZ information to the World Bank for a study on farmland value and fair investments. And again, climate change impacts in the case of Chinese economy. And last but not least, the most recent international study was on understanding the sustainable aviation biofuel potential in sub-Saharan Africa. So you see, AEZ can contribute. It does not give answers to all questions, but it can help give a good answer to many questions. And therefore, it's most important that you are able to run the system and to understand the value of the data that it produces. Now, what does the system look like? It has been portrayed in several ways. At IIASA, we do it like this. It has, on the left side, you see a large spatial GIS land resources database. The elements include historical and future climate attributes, soil and terrain resources, information on land cover, protected area, biodiversity areas, so areas that should perhaps not, or for sure not, be considered for agricultural uses, information on water resources, on administrative units, so that we can tabulate and link it to political decision making, and ancillary data on population distribution and livestock distribution. And the global AEZ analysis runs through, in this case, 7 modules. There is module 1, which assesses the climatic information and produces a climatic resource inventory and a number of agroclimatic indicators. Details will be, I think, shown and presented tomorrow. Once this is available and the setting is known, then what we call modules 2 and 3 do agroclimatic suitability and yield estimation for a quite large number of crops, land utilization types, we call it, which are crops grown under a set of management assumptions. With this information available, we go to the next step, module 4, which uses a spatial soil database and soil attribute database to do an agro-edaphic suitability assessment for each of these land utilization types. Again, details will be presented in the coming days. Module 5 takes agroclimatic suitability results and agro-edaphic suitability results and takes them together and produces what we call agro-ecological suitability of crops. And once this is available, this is the main output of the suitability and potential production assessment. This can be compared to either statistics or downscaled area, yield, and production to determine, in module 7, yield and production gaps, and to see where resource limitations can be relaxed or where better management is required to achieve higher outputs. That's the overall suit. In national assessments, you will see there are some additional steps done which link to economic assessment and to comparative advantage of crops, and I will have a short slide later on. In the global AZ analysis, these are the key geographic data sets that are being used, and in national studies you will need similar data sets wherever possible, of course, coming in consistent classifications, etc., from national sources. For climate, we use monthly, daily, and climate change information. The historical data, monthly data, and daily data for 6 climate attributes come from the AgERA5 datasets, which are continually updated. In Global AEZ version 5, we use it for the period 1981 to 2022. And these data are monthly or annually updated, so there will be a series for 2023 available soon, and so forth. The data are rasterized data. The original AgERA resolution is 0.1 degree, which has been spatially refined to, which is 6 minutes, has been spatially refined to the standard Global AEZ raster information at 5 arc minutes resolution, which is about at the equator 10 by 10 kilometers. Climate change information, in our case, Global AEZ, comes from an international model intercomparison project, the so-called EasyMIP project, which uses bias-corrected outputs of 5 Earth system models for the period 2015 to 2100. And in our work, we use 3 transient scenarios, so emission scenarios, and evaluated by 5 Earth system models each. So we have 15 trajectories going into the future for the period 2015 to 2100. As far as soil terrain, of course, important inputs into the AEZ system, we have FAO has recently released a new version of the harmonized world soil database. It's called version 2, and it consists of 2 parts: a geographic layer, which indicates soil mapping units, and a link to that in 7 depth layers, quite a large number of soil attributes, which are then used to match or compare to the soil requirements of each land utilization type of each crop. Elevation and terrain slopes come from processing of the ALOS dam data from the Japanese satellite missions, and we use at 30 arcsecond both the soil map, the elevation, and the terrain slope classes have been assembled at 30 arcsecond resolution, so about 1 kilometer resolution at the equator. And the altitude is compiled from the ALOS 1 arcsecond 30 meter data, and represents the median of all the subgrid cells in a 30 arcsecond grid cell. And the terrain slope classes are distributions of the 1 arcsecond slope gradient data that have been calculated and assembled into 10 classes. Land cover is represented in the system as a key input as well. It is done in terms of 12 layers with land cover shares in each 30 arcsecond grid cell, compiled from high resolution land cover products, and it is focused on the year 2020 approximately. There is some of the data sets were slightly earlier. Land equipped for irrigation, of course, we want to distinguish between rain-fed and irrigated agriculture, and there's a data set which comes from, currently still from the global map of irrigated areas, which is published at FAO. And We also use what we call an exclusion layer, which is areas which are either under legal protection or are considered of high biodiversity value. And we use data sets from World Database of Protected Areas from 2022, key biodiversity areas, the C4 wetland data sets, and another wetland data set. Those are the areas considered of particular environmental and biological value and are excluded from or considered to be excluded from agricultural development. Last not least, there are various ancillary data, administrative boundaries, major hydro basins, population distributions, and livestock distributions, which are used to set also the context in a socioeconomic sense to the land evaluation results that are obtained. To give you an example of what does terrain slope distribution look like nowadays in the global agroecological zone system, as I said, the terrain slopes have been derived from ALOS data, Advanced Land Observing Satellite, which was launched by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, has a spatial resolution of 1 arcsecond, which is about 30 meters, and was used to derive terrain slope gradients and terrain slope aspects. And these terrain slope gradients are then put into 10 classes. They are listed here, 0 to 0.5%, etc., up to more than 45% slope gradient. And this class information is assembled and aggregated to 30 arcseconds. And you see here on the left map, the median slope class that has been calculated for an area covering Tunisia here. And on the right map, you see the share of, in fact, the first 4 classes, the sum of the first 4 classes, slope classes. So all the percentage of a grid cell that is between 0 and 8% of slope gradient. So there's a very detailed representation of the land that then goes into the edaphic assessment. Let me first come to the agroclimatic assessment. It is a classification of climate data and creation of historical, baseline, and future geo-referenced climatic resources. The algorithm in module 1 produces temperature profiles and what we call temperature growing periods. It runs a daily reference soil water balance. It generates a variety of gridded agroclimatic indicators relevant to plant production, and it characterizes the climatic context and variability of current and future crop cultivation. So it is not dealing with a food crop yet. It's dealing with what we call a FAO reference crop to do a reference water balance, which gives the first set of indicators. And perhaps the best known of these indicators is the length of growing period or number of annual growing period days. The background to that is that the agroclimatic potential productivity of land depends largely on the number of days during the year when both the temperature regime and the moisture supply are conducive to crop growth and development. And this period is termed the length of the growing period, LGP, and the LGP is determined based on prevailing daily temperatures and the daily water balance calculations for the FAO reference crop. The calculation methods are detailed both in the documentation of AEZ as also in various FAO publications. Raster maps, this is a selection, there is in fact many more. Raster maps generated in the AEZ analysis of module 1 include those which are listed here. There's reference potential evapotranspiration in each grid cell, calculated a reference actual evapotranspiration, which uses a generic soil with 100 millimeter water holding, available water capacity. Then the count of the daily of the days in a year where both the temperature and moisture, soil moisture criteria for growing period days are met. This can be a contiguous period, but it can fall in more than one period. So we also calculate what is the length of the longest contiguous growing period and what is the starting date of the longest component growing period. There's also similar concepts applied to temperature regimes. There is a temperature growing period for days with average daily temperature above 5 degrees. We call it LGBT5. And similar for LGBT10, number of days where the average daily temperature is above 10 degrees, which is also used as a proxy for the frost-free period in a location. There is multi-cropping classification produced in the module, both under irrigation assumptions as well as under rain-fed conditions, and it classifies each pixels in one of 8 multi-cropping classes. There is indicators counting the number of rain days in a year or the number of days, consecutive days, dry days in the year, the longest period of that kind. There's calculation of net primary production, the Fournier index, and various P over PET ratios, which are also a good indication of annual or seasonal conditions, comparing incoming precipitation to demand in terms of potential evapotranspiration. With the module 1 completed, we can go to module 2, the agroclimatic suitability and yield estimation. It is the calculation of biomass and yield for specific land utilization types. I mentioned already a land utilization types in the simplest case is a crop grown under a certain set of management assumptions. For global AEZ, we have low, intermediate, and high or advanced management conditions. And accordingly, some of the crop parameterizations that are used in the simulations are adapted to these management assumptions. So we get not only one answer, but we get answers for a crop under different management conditions. And there are 2 basic calculation steps. The first one is the calculation of crop biomass and yield potentials, considering only prevailing radiation and temperature conditions. And second, so this is sort of the ultimate potential. Second, computation of yield losses due to water stress during the crop growth cycle. Details of that will come. And a yield estimation for irrigation conditions assumes that no crop water deficits will occur, so that water is both available and given at the right time in the irrigation schedule, so that there is no moisture deficit, water deficits experienced by the growing crop. One of the features of AEZ assessment, agroclimatic assessment, is what we call the optimal crop calendar. The crop calendar, that is the dates from sowing to harvesting for a given LUT and grid cell, is determined by identifying the sowing date that leads to the highest expected agroclimatic yield. All possible sowing date combinations for a given LUT are tested in each grid cell, so that is a very computationally intensive process. And for rain-fed production, AEZ calculates potential crop yields by testing these possible crop calendars within the permissible part of the year of the LGP, and it selects a starting date of the crop when the estimated agroclimatic potential yield becomes the highest. For irrigated production, we can relax this time period limitations, and we test all years that fall into a certain applicable temperature growing period and find out what is the highest potential agroclimatic yields that can be achieved when we test different starting dates, and the best result is then taken as the representative outcome for the given grid cell. However, just to mention it, of course, for national studies where you have very good planting information, you can limit this crop calendar search to certain periods of time or even a single day if you want to do that. Water limited biomass production yields under rainfed conditions. Water stress may of course occur during different stages of the crop development. I hear some noise. Okay. And for that purpose, we use an FAO method. Again, it is well described and documented to calculate a water stress yield reduction factor to account for water deficits in different crop development stages. And that factor is then applied to the estimated net biomass and potential yield to give the attainable agroclimatic yield under water stress. The crop water requirement is calculated in relation to crops to potential evapotranspiration. For potential reference potential evapotranspiration, the system uses the Penman-Monteith method, and that is for each of the days in the crop cycle multiplied with what is called a KC factor that relates the crop-specific, crop and stage-specific potential evapotranspiration to the Penman-Monteith reference evapotranspiration. Again, more details will come, but these coefficients are then, as described in the FAO 1998 report, adjusted for local conditions of relative humidity and wind. And with this information, we run a daily soil-water balance calculation, which distinguishes between field capacity, actual soil moisture conditions, a level that is the permanent wilting point, and that subdivides the water in the soil into an easily extractable part, a less easily extractable part where already some deficit occurs, and the part that is unavailable. And of course, crops will do well as long as the soil moisture range is within the easily extractable part. And it is the task of the soil water balance calculation to find out what the soil moisture status is and what therefore the implication is for each land utilization type. The result of the agroclimatic simulations is what we call agroclimatic yield potential. You see here two examples from a national study of Thailand. On the left-hand side, you see the calculated agroclimatic yield of cassava in dry weight, kilograms per hectare. And on the right-hand side, you see the same for oil palm, kilogram of oil per hectare. And of course, as you can see, there's climatic gradients which affect the yield. There's no soil, so soil is assumed perfect in this calculation. Still, it's only the agroclimatic part, and you see parts where, for example, oil palm would not be able to grow because of the climatic conditions, temperature, and or moisture availability. Raster maps generated in the AEZ analysis of module 2 is starting date of a crop cycle, which is determined in this crop calendar search. the length of the crop cycle, the number of days that it is in the field from sowing to harvest, the actual crop evapotranspiration, the yield reduction factors related to temperature conditions, to soil moisture conditions, and to agroclimatic constraints which are applied. All three are reduction factors that reduce the radiation and temperature determined potential output and reduce it to this attainable agroclimatic yield. An array which we call land utilization selection index. Behind this is the fact that we are not dealing only with one wheat type, but in the global AEZ with 20 different generic wheat types. And the system then selects in each grid cell a best land utilization type for that location. And this map would indicate which of the LUTs has been selected in a particular location. Crop cycle accumulated temperature sum, important agronomic parameter, the potential agroclimatic yield, and the water deficit or net irrigation requirement that has been determined during the crop-specific water balance calculation. And this is done for each LUT, for each input and management level, for each time period. Historically, in AEZ version 5, we have two 20-year periods, 1981 to 2000 and 2001 to 2020. And we have 4 future 20-year periods from 2021 to 2040, etc. Last one, 2081 to 2100. The agro-edaphic suitability estimates, as the name suggests, yield reduction due to constraints induced by soil and terrain condition. It produces evaluations of 7 major soil qualities estimated from the soil attributes stored in the soil database. The limitations are again estimated by crop and are combined in a crop and input level specific suitability rating, yet another reduction factor that has to be applied. And it runs, it generates a variety of graded agroclimatic rating. Okay, those parts are not so important. Let me go to the soil suitability rating. I mentioned already there are 2 components of the soil database, a geographic layer and a soil attribute database. And AEZ produces estimated yield reduction due to constraints induced by prevailing soil and terrain conditions in terms of 7 what we call soil qualities. And the soil qualities are listed here. I'm not reading it out for you, but they consider different aspects of the soil plant interaction, and they are input level specific assessments, and they are assessed for each of the different soil depth layers, which is then weighted by LUT specific soil root distribution to come up with this reduction factor as a consequence of different soil conditions. And it's also combined with an assessment of terrain suitability, assuming that, of course, the steeper the terrain is, the more difficult it will be to work on this, and the more the erosion hazard will increase, and both are not seen as positive in AEZ. So it is punished in terms of further reduction factors for these limiting conditions. The spatial information for the global AEZ is the Harmonized World Soil Database version 2.1, published this year at FAO. stored as a 30 arcsecond raster of spatial map units. There are more than 29,000 of these map units. Each of these map units can have one or more soils, usually more soils. So there is a multiplication in terms of assessments that has to be taking place in each grid cell. And the map unit IDs, so the unique identifier of each soil map unit, is linked to an attribute database which contains the soil-specific information in terms of a topsoil layer, which is the assumed 0 to 20 centimeter layer, and 6 further sub-layers which cover the depths between 20 and 200 centimeters. And some of the key attributes in the soil attribute database: soil texture class, drainage class, organic carbon content, cation exchange capacity, base saturation, pH, of course, salinity and sodicity levels, calcium carbonate content, gravel content, and more. And I think the day after tomorrow, Dr. Nachtigall will give a more detailed introduction to soil evaluation. As a result of the soil and terrain suitability assessment, here is an example of what comes out in a study which was done in Afghanistan. The crop under consideration is the most important crop in Afghanistan, wheat. And what the index shows is a very high value of 10,000, means that there is perfect conditions for wheat growing in terms of soil and terrain conditions. And as limitations of soil or terrain come in, the value is lower, and the index has a value of 0 to 10,000. And you see here the dark green areas, which are the best values for wheat growing in the situation of Afghanistan. Module 5 represents the final step in the GIAEZ crop suitability and land productivity assessment. It combines what you have heard before, both the results from Module 2.3 and from Module 4, and it produces agro-ecological yield potential maps, which are generated by LUT for each input and management level. And it gives you also the final answer, given the actual soils in each grid cell, what the estimated crop water requirements and deficits and irrigation requirements are. Again, an example from the study in Afghanistan. This is now what we call the suitability classes for growing wheat in Afghanistan. And here we have already combined the rain-fed assessment for rain-fed areas and the irrigation assessment for areas known to be equipped with irrigation. So it's the final result here. And again, the dark green areas would be those where wheat production is most suitable and most productive. Here's 2 more examples. It is, of course, not only a suitability classification, but also estimation of attainable yields. On the left-hand side, you see, again, agroecological suitability classified for rain-fed cassava in Thailand. And on the right-hand side, you see the estimated attainable yields in kilogram per hectare for cassava that comes out from the full set of modules run on the available database in that context. Here also 2 examples of water calculation. On the left lower map, you see the calculated crop evapotranspiration for wheat under rain-fed conditions in the rain-fed areas. And on the upper right side, you see the calculated net irrigation water demand for areas where irrigation is available in order to meet the full crop water requirements of the wheat crop. Here are some of the variables, maps generated in the analysis of what we call Module 5. It's actual crop evapotranspiration, suitability index class, calculated in 3 variants. I will come to that. Water deficit, net irrigation requirements, and again, yield, attainable yield calculated in 3 variants. Why 3 variants? Since we have in each grid cell a combination of soils and a combination of terrain slope classes, we get a distribution of yields in each grid cell, and you can then, of course, produce a map of the best occurring class in each grid cell. Is here called yield YX. You can produce an average attainable output density yield for a grid cell. It's called YA. And since we have a land cover share, and say there's 20% cropland in a grid cell, we assume that the best 20% of the land is used for agriculture. So that would be the average yield of the best 20% of the distribution that has been produced on the basis of soil and terrain information for that grid cell. So it's rich information, and of course it's up to you, the user of the information, to decide which one is the most relevant for the study that you're doing. I want to mention this, and I'm about to finish a little bit more, please. The National Agro-ecological Zones analysis typically includes also an economic assessment, an assessment of comparative advantage. Of course, it requires national data to do that, but there is, given the agroecological suitability and attainable production potential, we try to estimate for each crop what are the expected production costs, and therefore, given crop prices, what is the expected net revenue. And once this is assessed for each or a list of crops, one can then go to a step doing a comparative performance analysis of different crops, and you will see 2 simple examples of that in my slides. So first example is coming from China, where the maps that you see here show the estimated attainable net revenue in yuan per hectare on respectively the rain-fed and irrigated cropland, assuming multiple cropping of selected major crops with adequate inputs and advanced management under current climatic conditions. So there is, of course, a number of conditions that are set here for such a calculation. It's the attainable yield of the current climate, in this case 1981-2010 average climate. It is all major crops in China have been, that AEZ can assess, have been considered. And where possible and available, multi-cropping sequences have been constructed and evaluated as such. And you can see here the dark red areas would be those where, with irrigation, the highest net revenues could be expected by farmers. And where you go to the orange or greenish tones, these would be more marginal areas. When we then have a number of crops assessed in this way, like here in Thailand, the best performing crop of 8 major economic crops were considered in the analysis and used in each grid cell, and we selected the highest performing crop and to define the attainable net revenue of a grid cell, and that was called the umbrella crop. And each individual crop is then compared to the performance of this umbrella, and the result is shown in terms of a few classes denoting ranges of the ratio of each crop's estimated net revenue relative to the best possible net revenue. So we compare, so if, say, cassava can produce half as much as the best crop that has been assessed in a location, then it would fall into this third class of 0.4 to 0.6. And so we get a visual representation of where each crop has a high comparative advantage comparing it to this other, in this case, other 7 crops that have been assessed. So where this is shown in dark green, rice is considered a very competitive crop in the crop cultivation options that farmers have in those areas. With this, I stop here. My time is up. For further information on methods and special datasets used in GIAZ version 4, which is in the data portal at FAO, you can see the details. They have been provided in the model documentation. GIAZ version 5 is currently under processing and is expected to become available in 2024. With that, I thank you for your attention. And of course, I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Gunther. So if you have any questions, please, you can leave them in the comments or in the chat box, and our expert will answer it back, or you can compile it and then we'll have a brief Q&A at the end. So before we go for a quick coffee break, I would just like to mention that this training is a part of the SolarWise initiative. I'll send you a quick link. So this SolarWise initiative stands for Soil, Land, and Water Information System for Crops. So it belongs to the Land and Water Division of the FAO. This initiative aims to support sustainable management of soil, land, and water through integrated approaches such as land use planning, land crop suitability models, technical capacity building, improved information and target decision making, and stakeholders participation. And it's all based on the latest information on soil, land, and water. So if you're interested, then please check out the website that I sent in the chat box. So thank you to all the speakers, and I think we'll have a quick coffee break. Yeah, we'll leave the chat box open. Maybe Gunther can answer that question. So we'll come back at 35 minutes past the hour, wherever you are. So yeah, we'll reconvene back in about less than 15 minutes. Yep. Thank you. Okay. Right. I think I'll continue with our presentation. Let me share the screen. Okay. I hope everyone can see my screen. So the next block will involve myself, and then just introduction to the format of the training, and also just quick introduction to the PyAEZ modules. And then we have another colleague from FAO talking about how to access the climate data. And then we'll be joined by another FAO rep, the regional office for Asia and Pacific, look at the potential application of PyAEZ. Right. So again, welcome everyone to the PyAEZ version 2.2 training. So from tomorrow onwards, our training will be just like today. We will have 2 blocks daily. So for each block between the break, we have 30 minutes of online theoretical sessions. We have guest speakers such as Gunther and also Freddie, who's a soil expert. And this theoretical session will be followed by about 45 minutes hand-on technical training or demo from my colleague Swan from the Geoinformatics Center at AIT. And we will use Google Colab, which is essentially a cloud computer, so that everyone can follow, and it will be like a quick way to set up everyone and get everyone onto the same setup as soon as possible. And we will also use QGIS software for additional raster processing for the input data. And there will be Q&A sessions at every end of the training session. Again, as I already mentioned in the chat, in case anyone haven't seen, so all the training materials as well as all the recordings of each day will be shared and uploaded onto the Google Classroom. And if you have problem joining the Google Classroom, it will be the same materials that are kept in the Google Drive as well. So I hope everyone's registered and have the link for the Zoom. So these are the links for this training, which I've already shared, but it's here on the slide, and you can go back to them. So the Google Colab, again, just like the Google Classroom, you need a Google account or email to sign in with this. And then we have the Google Classroom for training announcements and also any learning materials. And then the Google Drive, which directly linked to that Google Classroom system. Here, just a quick guide of how to, if you never used or installed QGIS before, there's a guideline here for you to quickly set up on your computer. And now onto the PyAEZ package. So you can download and install in several ways. So for a beginner or someone who never had experience using our package before, I would suggest going to our GitHub repository, where you can download a zip file. It will be equipped with source codes, example data, as well as all the example notebooks where you can run through them. So we use Jupyter Notebook. So it's a working notebook with boxes where you can run the code directly into those workbooks. And that's easier for people to learn. So yeah, if you're a beginner, I would advise you to work off these zip files. And if you're more experienced, our version 2.2 are also updated onto the PyPy. through pip installation and also Anaconda, so you can install using Conda. Again, everything is updated to version 2.2. And with this, you will only, just like any other Python packages, it would just be source code only. Then you can construct your own workflow to do your AEZ analysis or modeling. So for the prerequisites for PyAEZ to run, so it's the same as the previous version. So because we're dealing with a lot of maps and geo reference raster, we require these dependencies, such as GDAL, NumPy to just process any basic arithmetics. We also use number because we haven't got to that stage where we parallel running everything. We run everything serially, just on a single node. And some of our routines are quite computationally heavy. So number helps speed up Python calculation. And then we have SciPy for any general scientific calculation. And because we're just for the GitHub repository, we have workbook in Jupyter Notebook, which I already mentioned that it's easier for beginner to learn. But if you're more experienced, you can run the code on any code editor of your choice. Just briefly about PyAEZ, this Python package for AEZ framework. The development started back in June 2019 under the funding from FAO RAP under the SAMIS project for the Lao PDR. It's open source package currently in its version 2.2, which we just launched over the weekend. So it aims to improve the national AEZ application because we only act as a calculator. So we give the power to the user at the national level to be able to input the national database, be it climate data or soil or crop related data. So in terms of application, it can be used for both near-term and long-term actions. So for the near-term actions, we could be looking to develop crop-specific rationales for interventions to address and plan for any climate change effect or the degradation of the local ecosystem. We're also looking to provide sector-specific information and insights on the climate change risk. As for the long-term actions, we're looking to support the foresight and the scenario planning to inform policymakers on strategy adjustment and how to respond to climate change. Or the plot here on the graphic here on the right, on the top part, I think it's what Gunther has already mentioned. So for the AEZ framework, we taking in the climate data, the soil data, the land utilization data, crop data, and any terrain or land related data. And we filter that through the soil requirement, the climate requirement, the crop requirement, the plant ecophysiology. And at the end of it, we get the crop yield maps out, the crop suitability maps, as well as suitable agricultural land utilization options. And at the bottom, we have an example from our previous work in Lao PDR. So on the left, we have the current climate. I think this is for rainfall. And then we also can input future projected climate scenarios. And in this case, on the right, we have the hotspot of where would be the most suitable to grow banana according to whatever input climate you put in. So for the PyAEZ modules, we have 6 modules So I will start off with going through quickly the input data. So for PyAEZ, we need 6 climate data. We'll go into that in the next slide. So these are, the formatting is quite important because we need the input data to be a very specific format and shapes. We also need some soil property data, soil map, the terrain map. So that includes the slope raster, the elevation raster. We would also need some administration boundary raster just for clipping purposes. And then we also need user to construct their national, their local soil property Excel sheet for us to use that for the soil constraint. And then we also need some crop specific parameters as well. So for module, we have module 1, we use it for the agroclimatic data analysis. So module 1 is where we process all this climate data and we turn them into intermediate indices for further calculations. Module 2, we call crop simulation. So this is where the heavy calculations reside. It's where we do the biomass calculation as well as producing the maximum attainable yield. And so we have this maximum attainable yield. So module 3, 4, and 5 are where we impose all the various constraints that could reduce this maximum yield. So module 3, we impose the agroclimatic constraints. Module 4, we impose the soil constraints. And module 5, we impose the terrain constraints. And at the end of module 5, we should arrive at this reduced yields, which then in module 6, we convert this yield into net revenues. So we look at the economic suitabilities and we put all the yields into terms of money and see if it's worth it to grow with the climate setup. Just to highlight, as I mentioned, our current state of PyAEZ, our package, still needs very specific format for the input data, the climate data. So for climate data, we need 6 of them. We need the minimum air temperature, maximum air temperature. So these are 2 meters above surface. Total precipitation, downward solar radiation, relative humidity, and wind speed at 2 meters above the surface. So you have to consistently use the same data frequency. So if you use daily, you either use daily for the whole set or monthly for the whole set. And then any subroutine that would require either of the frequency for the calculation, it will have internal interpolation that you don't have to worry about. You just input either daily or monthly for 6 of them in the correct unit. So our calculations are done using NumPy format. So below is just a quick graphical illustration of when we say our climate data needs to be in a 3D NumPy array. So for one array, you just have like one-dimensional array, and then 2D is essentially a map. And then because we're stacking a year worth of data, either daily or monthly, then we arrive at this 3D like data block. And it needs to be row, column, and time at the end. But the modern day like NetCDF file for all the climate data would be the other way around. They tend to have the date and time first, and then row and column. So there's a lot that goes into the data preparation, which you can consult us if you have run into any problems. So you can reach out to our team, and we'll try to help. So on GitHub, our GitHub website, our code repository, we have a forum where people can ask You can either help us improve the code, or if you have any questions or have any problems when you try to use our package, you can post them there, and then our team can respond to it and help you fix your problem. And here just quick references and links to all the available resources for both AEZ and PyAEZ. So I think when I talk about the data, I think that's a good leadway into the next section with Ricardo. Okay, so Ricardo's here. Stop sharing. Okay. Wait, sorry, Ricardo, 2 seconds. Okay, can you unmute?
I think, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Okay, perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was trying to. Okay. Yes. Well, thanks, thank you, Tipong, for the introduction. Well, I have a brief presentation regarding that. Well, my name is Ricardo. I work also at FAO, but for the OCB division, the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment, particularly with the RIS team. And one of the things we work on is, in fact, democratizing access to climate data and information. So, well, we have undertaken a collaboration with Kitipong and NSL on how to use some of the climate data that we are currently working with, and how to basically sort of semi-automatically get that data into PyAEZ, so that this would reduce a lot the work that is required currently by the user of PyAEZ for the climate module. So I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully, do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, well, that's the title, Climate Data for PyAEZ Forcing. These are more or less the content that I want to cover briefly in this quick few slides. Yeah, well, you know, obviously importance of climate data in the context of crop models. And one of the things that we try to address, which is the complexity of working with climate data. The tool that we develop, but this is going to be very, very brief, because of course this training is about PyAEZ. But in principle, the data that we work on with the climate data is part of a tool we developed, which is called Kava. I mean, it's freely available online. You can Google it, you're going to find it. And then the last part is how actually are we going to use the data that we are hosting in Kava for PyAEZ. So I guess the first point, the importance of climate data, I guess this is, you know, sort of intuitive. Agriculture depends on climate, and of course, also crop models. So in principle, if agriculture wasn't so depending on climate, then of course, maybe we wouldn't be here talking about the importance of climate data and information, right, for running crop productivity models. But of course, because crop productivity models simulate crop growth in a way, and that depends on climate, then of course, one of the most important things for running crop models is getting and understanding the required climate information. And of course, as Kitipong said in his presentation, one of the applications is understanding how climate change affects you know, crop yield or crop evapotranspiration or any other crop physiological processes. So why is it complex to work with climate data? These are some of the complexity. First of all, of course, understanding the source. These are some of the acronyms that you might encounter, you know, Cordex, CCMIP, CMIP. Also learning how to work with NetCDF files. I mean, you need to learn at least a specific library, depending on the programming language that you use. Of course, understanding also the choice of the climate model, which scenario, also adding complexity of bias correction. So there's a lot of things that you need to sort of, you know, be aware of in this context. So this is a little sort of diagram that shows you that, in fact, very close to reality, in my opinion, is that, you know, a climate science community, and here includes climate scientists and even climate modelers, they develop these models. The data is publicly available, but even though the data is publicly available, the usage of the climate data remains difficult. So, for example, on the right side here, you see the impact model community users, and there is the sort of barrier. So when we develop CAVA, one of the idea of CAVA, which stands for Climate and Agriculture Risk Visualization Assessment, was to democratize the access and usability of climate information, in particular from climate model outputs. So this is the data that we're currently hosting. I'm gonna tell you a bit more about this data in the next slide and why what we are doing is different from what is currently done. But in principle, the climate data that we have for the future is CORDEX core models. So CORDEX stands for Coordinated Regional Climate Downscaling Experiment, and it provides the output of climate data that have been generated through regional climate models, so dynamical downscaling. And this data that we're using is part of CORDEX Core, so it's a sub-initiative of CORDEX, which provides this climate information at 25 by 25 kilometer resolution. Currently is among the most, is the highest dynamically downscaled product that exists. For the past, we are hosting two datasets, ERA5 and W5E5. I'm pretty sure you are familiar with ERA5. W5E5 is the bias-corrected version of ERA5. So this is just the only slide that I have on CAVA. In principle, our idea to democratize access to climate data was to create a graphical user interface that provides not just the access to the data, but a visualization purposes. And the original data, which is what I'm going to focus on, is provided through an R package that we developed, which is called CAVA Analytics. And basically what we are trying to do with Kitty Pong, NSL, and everyone is developing PyAEZ is to communicate, to have a communication between PyAEZ and CAVA Analytics, at least, you know, regarding the source of the data. So, well, first question, is climate data not already democratized? Well, you know, there's a lot of data portals, if you think about it. There's Copernicus, we have the Earth System Grid Federation nodes, and all of these initiative or data points provide this data, right? It is publicly available. The problem is that it's not so easy to retrieve the data. Well, I would say not even so easy to retrieve the data, especially from the Earth System Grid Federation nodes. But in principle, one of the main problems is that, first of all, you have to download the files. For the ESG, so the ESGF, the Earth System Grid Federation, you cannot crop the file as you download. So you have to download, for example, a whole domain. You cannot download one file. It's usually 5 years at a time, the net CDF that you get. CORDEX models need reprojection. So CORDEX rotated coordinates, and you need to reproject in VUSIS 84. And that requires quite a lot of computer power. And surely you need to learn command line interfaces and using Linux, etc. Then you get one file per variable. They're not combined. And also usually needs a lot of disk space, partially because some of the data center cannot, you cannot crop a specific, select a region basically, and only download the data for that specific place. So what's the difference in CAVA? Well, in principle, you don't need to download any file. And I show you how that works. CORDEX models that we are hosting in the server, they are already reprojected, so no need for reprojection. And also we have one file per climate model, meaning that each climate model contains several variables, all of the variables required by PyAEZ for running. And is one unique file for all the whole time period. So here I show you in Python how you can access the data using Xarray for W5E5. So basically, this is the URL. This data is stored in thread server at the University of Cantabria. And basically, you can use directX array, for example, to open the data set and get data in your computer, not the file, but the data will be stored in RAM, okay? Which simplify a lot the downloading and the uploading, because it's ready to be working with, basically. So how are we gonna try to integrate the Kava analytics, so the climate data from Kava for PyAEZ? Basically, we're working on a function, Python function. This is an example of how the function could look like, and this function could be made available, for example, in the climate module. And so these are the arguments of the function. One of the arguments is that you have to specify the Cortex domain. So this would be a character, and these are the potential, for example, Cortex domains. I know I haven't explained what Cortex domain are, but in principle are just region of the world for which the climate data is provided. So AFR is Africa, Southeast Asia, etc. I mean, it's gonna take you 2 minutes to learn about this. The observation, this is going to be a logical, so true or false. So basically, if it's true, you're only going to get past data. If it's false, sorry, if it's true. If it's false, it means you are interested in projection, so future data. Then you can specify the model you're interested in. Cortex Core provides 6 models. So here you can specify 1 to 6 as a number to say, okay, I want the first model, second model, etc. This will only go for the observation. So if observation is true, then you specify the time period for your for the past. And years up to that would work only with observation equal false. And basically by default, you're gonna get data from 1980 up to the years that you selected, you specified. This can be up to 2100. The reason for that, well, a bit technical, but it's due to the fact that this data that we are thinking of allowing PyAEZ user to get will be bias corrected. So we need the historical simulation run of the model to basically learn the bias correction factor and apply that for future projection. This can be a character, so you can specify the country and you get the data automatically, or you can actually set the longitude and latitude boundaries. Yeah, so this is work in progress. We have a GitHub repository for this, which you can follow. At the moment, I didn't have that much time to work on it, but there's already some code there, even though it's in R. So I'm gonna make probably maybe 2 functions, one in R and one in Python. And all of this, of course, I mean, is been through the collaboration with NSL and Kitty Pong and and Swan and the developer of PyAEZ. Yeah, this may be the last slide just to show, if you want to have a look at what Kava Analytics is, this is an R package. And basically the data, Kava Analytics allows you to get the data, but visualize it, calculate indicators by specific for climate, okay? So I think that's it from my side. Kitty Pong, back to you, and I can answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Yep. Right, okay. Yeah, I've been sharing some links, and Ricardo, if you have any more links, you can also provide that to everyone in the chat box. Thanks again. So next up, we have okay. Yep. So next up we have Bo from FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific to talk to us about the potential application of PyAEZ for climate resilient agriculture in Asia and the Pacific. Bo, are you here? All right, okay.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Kitty. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I won't take up too much time. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an insight into some of the applications that we have been working on for the use of PyAEZ and AEZ data in general, and it may give you a broader perspective on how this type of application could be used for different types of I suppose specific products that can serve sort of higher level objectives, both in terms of the public sector and its connection particularly to to assessing and also reporting on with respect to climate change impacts on agriculture. But of course, AEZ has a much broader range of applications as well, and may be of use for a range of users, not just government, but also private sector. But today I'm briefly going to talk about how we have been using it at the FAO regional office in terms of climate change impacts and also informing a range of different processes related to addressing the impacts of climate change on agri-food systems. I think the first thing, with respect to thinking about AEZ in general, is that when we're thinking about decision-making processes in the agricultural sector, we can think of them in terms of, short and near term, but then of course, looking over a seasonal context, this is where the bulk of the decision-making process, of course, is made in terms of management of the system. This is where farmers are making most of their choices about crop selection, about when to plant, when to water, how to manage the actual cropping system. But as you move out in time, over a period of years and decades, there are additional decision-making spaces where tools like AEZ and combining AEZ and integrating climate change scenarios into AEZ can be particularly beneficial for thinking about actions to inform policy making and also to produce analysis on how changes in climate over time may be impacting and what the response options might be. So we tend to use AEZ quite a lot in that context and really thinking about how AEZ outputs, particularly informed by climate change models, could help us think about moving from, say, incremental adaptation, which is definitely a process that is ongoing, particularly in Asia, but also globally. We see farmers across the region undertaking different practices, varietal selection, different applications in terms of water management to address shifts in climate during growing season, year to year. But what we're really using AEZ for is to help government and to help stakeholders that are supporting farmers, to maintain or enhance the productivity of the crop, but also to address external threats like climate change. How AEZ could be helping them to think about potentially needed transformational change, particularly as, say, the impacts of climate change become more intense or more frequent. And AEZ can say, provide useful information and evidence base to think about these potential impacts, particularly in terms of understanding perhaps shifts in suitability over time and when we might expect, for example, that because of certain climate change scenarios, existing cropping systems or patterns may no longer be particularly viable or profitable for producers in that region. How did we get started on this path, or how have what sort of inspired this, the use of AEZ in this context? Well, of course, you would have heard from Gunter and looking at that global scale, there's this AEZ has been used in that context quite a bit, thinking about future impacts of climate change. At the regional office at FAO, what we were trying to use AEZ for was more specific national level planning exercises. And indeed, a lot of the work on NAEZ does move into looking at the particular impacts of climate change on a range of crops. We had a program that just closed recently in Laos, where a big part of the program was to think about building capacity to think about transformative change in the context of climate change. And we wanted to develop a few examples that could help or spur the government to think about these processes. And the example that we started with using the older GAZE3 data sets was coffee. And because based on the GAZE data sets at that time, it was showing like a particularly dramatic change in suitability of coffee. And of course, particularly in the southern regions of Laos, coffee is a particularly important crop from a livelihoods perspective. And what the GAZE information was showing was basically that there had to be a complete rethink of the way that the government was going about supporting that particular sector. So we did two things in response to this. One was to see how we could recreate the AEZ analysis, integrating climate change models at the national level. And the second thing we did was to look at how we could develop a set of tools to make that type of analysis possible. And that's really where our partnership with AIT and with the Geospatial unit really came about. So this work goes back to 2019. And the team presenting to you today has started a process of sort of trying to build the PyAEZ platform, creating a flexible tool that that could be improved over time and that could enable the types of analysis that we were looking to undertake in Laos and more broadly. And so there has been a lengthy process to develop PyAEZ, also to work with stakeholders at the regional level and also in country, to develop potential applications. In the context of Laos, we were able to, and as Kiripon I think showed this earlier, we were able to use the PyAEZ tools, the PyAEZ analysis, combined with climate change downscaling work that was done by the government to recreate and enhance the AEZ analysis using different climate change scenarios for Laos. We did it for a range of crops, but I'll just show you how the coffee analysis was used. But basically here, what you can see is that there was an update, or more specificity to this updated analysis using PyAEZ and the additional agroclimatic inputs for this particular project. It was showing more nuance than the GAZE3 outputs. And you can see here, for example, in terms of Arabica and also on the next slide, Robusta, that we did see, for example, or we would expect, given certain climate scenarios. In this example, we're using 8.5, but others are possible, of course, with the inputs from different climate models into PyAEZ. And so what we were able to show here is that there were certain areas where we were expecting potentially a number of shifts downward in terms of suitability classes, and also potentially looking at possible encroachment as well. So as suitability was changing, there may be encroachment from future croppings, future responses to climate change on existing forest systems. So this analysis is then being used by the government, combined with another process that we were undertaking in partnership with CIAT in Laos to understand the different livelihood zones in the country and how shifts in the suitability of different crops, how that matches up with current livelihood activities across the country, the adaptive capacity of different communities given a certain agricultural system. And so combining this information, we're now able to support the government in undertaking quite sophisticated policy and planning exercises to think about the types of future investments that might be required to address climate change impacts on, say, coffee, on the coffee production system in the future. So yeah, that's basically how we have been using the applications we've been using PyAEZ for in the region, particularly for project development, for understanding specific climate change challenges and for targeting interventions, particularly related to climate finance. Also looking to further develop the potential to use AEZ outputs to inform transparency processes. The usefulness of the AEZ analysis when inputting climate change models is that it can give you a very specific story about how climate change may be affecting the suitability of key crops in a given agricultural system or a given national context. And so this type of information is becoming very important in terms of reporting to the UNFCCC. And of course, the example I just showed from Laos, we've also been using the AEZ outputs integrated with climate change models to inform policy and scenario development and planning exercises. And we're looking to continue that work in the region in the coming years. So in terms of our upcoming work, we continue to work with our colleagues at the Geospatial unit and AIT to strengthen the PyAEZ tool and platform. We are developing a range of projects, specific field programs around the region that are informed by AEZ analysis. We're also looking to develop and expand the tool set that is available through the PyAEZ tool. The outputs of some of the AEZ analysis, looking to see how that can be integrated into the work that we do on transparency, and also thinking about long-term strategies, the suitability of different systems over time, the types of investments or response options that might be required. And of course, we also are using these tools as part of our existing project portfolio. A good example is a GCF readiness project that's just getting underway at the moment. Thinking about future tools, developing different interpolations with AEZ outputs. This is an example of how we've been using, in this case, we're using GAZE data, but of course we can improve this analysis with local data and PyAEZ. Basically interpolating here yield gaps coming out of the GAZE data set, and then also population density to help us inform a targeting exercise where to focus on rice production, improving the sustainability, but also the resilience of rice production in Pakistan. And thinking about potential future applications, one that we are looking to develop is in terms of thinking about nutrition. This is from a very nice study a few years ago by Mario Herrero and colleagues, basically showing that the majority of food production, if we break it down into different crop types, is generally produced by smallholder farmers. You can see here, if you look at the darker colors, the purple and the blues, farms less than 20 hectares. You can see here that they tend to dominate in terms of global production of different types of food crops. And this translates into actually the situation where smallholder farmers also produce a majority of the nutrition globally, consumed globally. Now, this is important from a GAZE perspective, an AEZ perspective, because a lot of this information can be rendered spatially, and we can think about the suitability of, say, these types of crops that produce these types of nutrients as a basket, as a production basket within the context of a geographical system. And so, indeed, building on this analysis that was produced in 2017, you can find hotspots of nutritional yield focusing on specific nutrients. In this case, I just decided to show the outputs for vitamin A, and sorry, that's vitamin B2. These are important in the regional context because they are still, in terms of nutrient deficiencies, these are still key nutrients in this region. And so, developing AEZ approaches that can inform, say, a nutritional basket of crops in a given geographical region, so giving it additional information for policymakers to think about how they're structuring their systems based on agroecological suitability could be helpful in terms of thinking about broader agri-food systems and how to enhance the production of a range of nutrients over time. So these are the types of tools that we're looking to develop more in the future. But I'll leave it there for the moment, and great to see this work continuing. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Bo. Yeah, so today we're giving you a broad picture of the whole AEZ framework, as well as how it was utilized in a larger sense. And from tomorrow, we'll really start to dig down into the details of the technical details of our package. But yeah, again, thanks to all the speakers for the second half of the section. And now we'll go into the quick question and answer session. If you have any questions, is Gunther, are you still here? Maybe not. So we had some question from Gunther's session. And wait 2 seconds. So the question was why
I'm here.
Okay. Hi, Gunther.
Yeah, hi.
So the question was why rainfall data is used if the ET and PET can provide the water availability and deficit. And I think I asked the person, I asked Muhammad to elaborate more.
Yeah, I sent a response. As you said, the question is not 100% clear to me. Of course, in AEZ, I don't think we prefer precipitation to ET over PET. What I am trying to say or said is, for this agroecological zonation, which is a classification, of course, we look into both precipitation and P over ET. and it plays a role. And for crop-specific information, of course, there's a difference between rain-fed assessment and irrigation assessment. For rain-fed assessment, precipitation is, of course, determining what the ratio of crop-specific actual evapotranspiration to potential crop evapotranspiration will be, which determines then to what extent the maximum potential yield can be reached. And for irrigation conditions, the assumption is that soil moisture is available, will be replenished if in deficit by irrigation, and the actual crop evapotranspiration to potential crop evapotranspiration is 1. But I'm not 100% sure that this answers the question of Mohammed, but that was my first understanding at least.
Thank you. We have a hand raised by Navish.
Yes, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I am from FAO, Pakistan. I don't have a question, it's just a comment. We had a very successful workshop last week on SolarWise and presenting the results of crop suitability mapping for Pakistan. And a good number of colleagues and participants from that workshop are also present today. So they're attending this session. And most of them might not be using Python or maybe Google Colab and Python for the first time. So I just wanted to request that if we can make the hands-on exercises in the next days easier and much more, friendly for those who do not have, hands-on experience on programming in Python and Colab. And definitely this is all very helpful. I'll speak for Pakistan. The results and the applications and the tools that we have seen today, everything is very much useful, and we wish to make use of all of this information for Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, Swan? But we try to so all of our notebooks, we try to, at this stage, everyone can follow. Maybe there'll be some, from our experience, there'll be some difficulty setting up like the initial phase of it. But after that, it's more just click-based. And then you can follow us. And then if you're connected correctly, then it should be quite easy to follow. But yeah, we'll try to, both of us will be here to answer any questions along the way, and any off hours email as well. So you can always email us. I'll make sure to leave our emails in the Google Drive as well. And yeah, let's see for the next 3 days. But Swan, my colleague Swan from AIT will be leading the demo session.
If I may mention one thing regarding this training program, only for this year's training, we are like omitted out the actual practical session or data preparation because it was the last time it was taken longer than we anticipated. That's what happened. But of course, we also understand about some experts who lack some technical capabilities and skills as such. So I'm thinking of providing an Agnes and the actual basic Python, like a taste of Python basic programming, which will be distributed in the Google Sheets and in the Colab as well, so that you can refer back to as a basic foundation step before you proceed to the data preparations and the next steps of the actual usage of PyAEZ as well. These will be, we will provide them these additional documentation for that. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Swan. Okay, we have one more question. Are the climate data from Kava already bias corrected? Are they also available for SSP scenarios? Ricardo, if you're still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. So thanks for the question. So the data from Kava is not bias corrected, but is implementable. Is implemented in the idea that we have for preparing the Kava data for PyAEZ. The bias correction will be automatically implemented, or maybe we can well allow the user to decide as just as a bias correction equal true or false, maybe. So SSP scenario, Cordex data. So that is the data that we use in Kava, is using CMIP5. That's because there is always a lag of few years between the provision of general circulation models output, so GCM, and the provision of dynamically downscale models. And that's due to the computational constraint of running regional climate models. So CMIP6 Cordex will be fully available, probably my guess is in 2 years' time. Kava will move to CMIP6 Cordex as soon as we have the complete full or the complete full set of regional climate models. Until that, basically we only have RCP, but that's not due to it's due to the CMIP phase. Only CMIP6 works with SSP, not CMIP5.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. So from Alexandra, it's still unclear to me which software we need to physically install on our computer, Python or any. No, so throughout the workshop, we'll use Google Colab. So like I say, it's like a cloud computer. So for this training, you won't need to install anything on your local computer at all. We'll do everything online. And when I think I mentioned QGIS, that's for in the future when you need to prepare some geo reference like the GIS raster. But again, not for this training. This training we are providing you with all the example data, both the climate data and also all the GIS rasters, and then just to show you an idea of how to work with this workflow. And then once you're comfortable with it, hopefully at the end, then you can start looking to install something on your local computer, and then maybe start to utilize start to prepare some of your own national climate data, and yeah, just go from there. But for the next 3 days, you won't need to install. Just have an internet connection, and then we'll take you through all the workbook.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, Thomas.
Good day. Thank you for the training sessions. I just have a questions regarding my specific research study, which is to analyze the output of different processes for the same crop. Is this something that PyAEZ can do or potentially can do?
Are you talking about try to quantify the difference in the output yield? So currently we don't have like any internal routine for that, but then I would assume we could just do like just image or maps comparison and then quantify the difference that way. If everything is still referenced in the same, what do you call it, the same layout, the same projection. But yeah, PyAEZ doesn't have this the quantification of different outputs, because when we output an ultimate yield map, the reduced yield at the end, that's just coming from one set of climate data with this soil setting, with this crop data. So it's just only one flow. So we have to run, say, if you looking at different workflow, like 2, 3, and then you produce all these different maps, and then maybe we need additional steps just to compare the difference in the yields. But as for a single PyAEZ workflow itself, it doesn't have this quantification.
Is this something potentially can be developed into the workflow, or something that, for example, I can learn how to code it into PyAEZ?
Again, the one PyAEZ flow, it won't produce multiple maps of different crops. Like one flow would just produce one map of one crop with all the different settings. But yeah, if you're interested, you can get in touch. I think it's not too difficult to create a Python code to compare the different yields to quantify the difference. But it's not in the planned pipeline for PyAEZ yet. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? So you see me as the main facilitator throughout these 4 days, and then my colleague Swan and also Gunther will be back until Wednesday. It's not available in the last day, and then we have another expert, Freddie, joining us for the soil part, because he's the soil expert. And so that will be the team that you see on a daily basis. Any more questions? Nope. If you have any questions, again, if you're on the Google Classroom, you can post questions and any comments or feedback there as well, and then we'll compile them and try to get answer from experts if we don't know it ourselves. And I think in this case, we can close the meeting. So thank you everyone for joining. So the video after it's processed, and I'll try to upload that onto the Google Drive and then share to everyone. Thank you again to all the speakers. I think only Gunther and Ricardo left here. So thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you back again tomorrow, if not with more people. Yep. Thank you. So I'll end the meeting.